So there's spies that unions use in the workplace, and like they're called salts or plants. It's a strategy unions deploy where they'll hire people to go out and get hired by employers to then sort of infect the workplace and get them to turn. It's proven to be really effective. I mean, Starbucks, they unionized in the States largely because of assault.
Workplace law is complex and constantly changing. It can be hard to keep up, and the risk of getting it wrong can be costly for businesses. The Coffee and Law podcast is here to help HR professionals and employers stay informed. We'll cover what's changing and how to navigate real workplace situations and everyday people decisions. So grab your favorite warm drink and join us for engaging, practical, and educational conversations with top experts in workplace and employment law.
This podcast provides high-level general information. The perspectives shared by our guests are for educational purposes and do not constitute legal advice. If you have a specific question or concern, please consult a qualified lawyer.
Hi everyone, it's Amy Davies, founder and CEO of First 30 and also your Coffee and Law podcast host here, to remind you that First 30 offers career transition and outplacement services. So if you have terminations and layoffs coming up, this is a really good way to mitigate risk to your business and help your exiting employees recover from the job loss and get back to work. You can find out more information at www.first30ready.com/outplacement, or you can reach out to me, Amy, AMY, at first30ready.com. All of our programs include live coaching and a year of access. And in a tough job market, that can be very important. Now, back to our show. Hello and welcome, everyone. I hope whatever you're doing today, you're having a good day and that listening to this podcast makes it even better. I'm very excited today to have Peter Vlaar here, who runs his own firm. So, Peter, we're going to talk more about that in a minute. But I wanted to say first that we met, well, you were so kind to recommend First 30's outplacement program to a few of your clients. And then I had the opportunity to invite you to a workplace law event, which is run by HR Law Canada, who partners with us here. We sponsored the event, and Peter was my guest. So we got the chance to meet in person very quickly after that, actually. Our timing was in our favor. And then, as I remember, we went after that, you got a ticket last minute to Disrupt HR Kitchener Waterloo. So we event hopped together that day. So that was a lot of fun. And then we've kept in touch ever since. So that's, and you and anyone who isn't connected with Peter on LinkedIn that's listening to this, definitely connect with Peter. He's got some great video content. And I also wanted to just thank everyone for listening. If you are listening and you haven't done already, please subscribe. And we would so appreciate a 5-star rating if you're listening on audio. And of course, as always, I'd like to thank our producers, Storyfora, who do such an amazing job. But with that, Peter, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and what you do?
Yeah, well, thanks, Amy. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm a fan, and just glad to have the opportunity to chat some more with you. That was a wild kind of thing that you do when you're an adult is like network hopping, HR event hopping on one day. Like that's, but it was a fun day.
It was so worth getting out to a live event. And
Yes.
I should say that HR Law Canada is having more of those workplace law events. So if you're listening to this, check those out as well. I think they're doing some virtual ones to get started. So I would suggest everyone check those out. So sorry, Peter, for interrupting you, but please tell us a little bit more about your firm.
Yeah, all good. So my firm is called In Good Counsel. It's a labor and employment boutique run by me and my lovely wife who helps with running operations. I serve primarily employers, but also employees in workplace matters. So anything from hiring to firing and everything in between. We do litigation. and employment contracts, and also do a lot of labor law, which, we're going to get into some more today.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
And I'm very excited to talk about labor law. The first thing I want, and I also want to say we actually are drinking coffee today. Peter also has, we do actually drink
of
coffee
course.
on the Coffee and Law podcast. Um, I really
How
need
how
my
could you
caffeine
not?
today, Peter.
It's
It's been a
not called
busy week.
water in law. It's called coffee
No,
in
it's
law.
not called that's right. We're listening to a podcast called Water-in-Law. But we're here today to talk about labor law. And as you and I were kind of talking in the green room before we got started, you had mentioned there is some nuances that we should discuss before we get deeper into the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people hear labor and employment. I tell people that I'm a labor and employment lawyer, and I think a lot of them presume those are the same thing, when they're not. The labor actually refers specifically to unionized law, and employment refers to non-unionized law. And some lawyers don't practice labor because it is its own, it's governed primarily by its own statute, and it's its own kind of animal. And so I do both. And so when I say I do labor law, then I'm referring, yeah, to the law that governs unions.
Okay. And it's, I have to admit, I've had, we've done a lot. I don't know how many, like 11 or 12 episodes so far of this podcast, and I'm learning a lot, and I know a little bit. I know enough to be dangerous about certain topics we discuss, but I don't know a lot about labor law. And I know that one of the biggest things I hear from employers is, the fear of a union getting started in their organization. So I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about how does an organization avoid a union starting in the first place? Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I will um, often have employers come to me with that question. Sometimes it's because they have a general fear, but often it's because they've already have signs of the union kind of being like those murmurs or signs of a union being present in their workforce. The number one thing that I say to employers, and it sounds simple, but there's a lot behind it, is like the best defense is good offense, and that is just positive employee relations. Just treat your workers well. And that means a whole bunch of things. It means being transparent. It means applying policies consistently. And yeah, ultimately making sure that they feel seen and that they feel heard, and that they feel dignified, when they have concerns about maybe the compensation is obviously a big one. Maybe you don't have the room in your budget legitimately to make room for them for their demand or for their increase, but you at least are giving them the full picture. You're giving them an opportunity to be heard, and maybe there's some other benefit that you can give them. And you'll often find that in my experience, employers are reporting that they'll get a positive response from employees in those circumstances.
I've been slowly working on a book called Creating a Praise Culture, and it's really,
Cool.
it's what you're talking about. I know it can't all be, roses and sunshine, but, creating a praise culture can really help. I've run retention interventions in the past with some, especially in the manufacturing sector, and we often find that that is the biggest thing that people just say, "I just want a thank you. I just want to be treated kindly." If they have bosses that yell at them, or certain conduct is tolerated that they find intolerable, I would say it's exactly what you're saying, right?
Yeah, because you have to think about what a union is a response to, right? It's a response when a union shows up, it's a symptom of a problem, right? It's not the
Mhm,
union's fault. That's tempting to blame the
mhm.
union, be like, "Oh, what are they doing here?" But you actually, as leaders of a workplace, need to look back at yourself and say, "Well, what have I not done? And what is this is actually a symptom of in the workplace?" And it usually is people who feel that they're not seen and they're not heard, and that they need to reach out to a third party to get a voice. So training, depending on the size of your workforce, maybe if you've got supervisors, training them is often really effective, right? And how to kind of show up and to make people feel heard and feel seen.
Is there a threshold for how many employees an organization has in order for a union to be started? Like, say you have 2 employees, can they start a union? Or I know 25 is often a magic number, for other, policies and procedures, but
Yeah, interesting question. So yeah, so you can have a bargaining unit of one.
wow.
Yeah, that is possible. It's not common because a union is not really incentivized by they're not getting a great return on their investment in that. It typically happens when it historically was a larger unit that then dwindled. But it's 2 to 3 is still going to be quite low and is quite rare. Um, but as soon as you get into the 10 realm, then they become, over the long term, that can still be worth it, depending on how much litigation there might be at the front end for the union. That still might be worth it for them because they're constantly doing that assessment, right, of how much input or how much investment is this gonna take, and how much dues am I gonna potentially get. If they're 10 now, but it's looking like they're gonna scale to 50 within a short amount of time, then that's very attractive to the union, right? So it's not necessarily
Sure.
what your present number is. It can often be what is your future number. And so it's yeah, but there's no real magic number.
Okay. Now, imagine you're in an organization, a union, you're coming into it, the union is already there, it's established. What are some of the things that might be different for an HR professional when they're looking at labor law versus being an HR professional in an ununionized environment?
Yeah, so it's quite a different approach. When you're in a unionized environment, everything is governed by the collective agreement. And so there's advantages to that, and there's disadvantages. One of the administrative advantages is that it's a uniform across the board application of the rules that govern the workplace and the terms and conditions of every individual's employment. So there's no longer an individual employment agreement that needs to be negotiated with each employee. So when it comes to raises and salary and stuff, everybody, depending on their classification and their seniority, everybody knows what everyone else is getting paid, and everyone just knows that this is their grid. This is what's going to happen. So there's benefits to that, even in terms of culture, right? Where you don't have that sort of rumor mill around wages when it comes to, yeah, all the rules around seniority in terms of who might be entitled to a promotion, for instance. So say a new job comes up, that's one of the um, key things that a collective agreement will outline is that there are is that advancement to a next level position is purely determined by seniority and not by individual personality or characteristics. So, for instance, an HR person looking at filling a position internally, whereas they might have spotted someone who's quite new and they see potential in them for this more senior position, they can't just have them skip the line.
And just to go back, and I know we're a little late saying this, but I think it's important to understand. I'm going to tell you what I think a collective agreement is, and then you
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, just
Ooh.
in case there's anyone listening that doesn't know. But a collective agreement would be the agreement the union has negotiated with their employer that kind of governs how employees uh, are treated, function, their employment contracts, etc., salary ranges. Is that correct, or have I got anything wrong there?
Sort of, yeah. So it
Okay.
is. There's a bit of, I think, groundwork to explain how we get to the collective agreement, but essentially, once you get to that stage of starting to form a collective agreement, it is done by bargaining, and that bargaining is done between the union and um, the employer. And the union has their own staff, but then also members of the workforce, and they are a committee that's been nominated by the workforce, and they represent the workforce's interests. And so, and over a process of months, sometimes years, there will be back and forth negotiations and offers, usually starting with non-controversial things just to get those out of the way, but then getting into like the bigger monetary things, how much vacation, what are our benefits plans going to look like. And that's a back and forth negotiation until it's finalized, at least according to the committees. And then they put that to the workforce to a vote. And then if it does get a majority vote, then it's been ratified. And then once it's ratified, then it's in place and it's law. And those are typically 3-year terms. And so then every 3 years they get renegotiated.
And every 3 years, then, would an organization who doesn't have a legal counsel internally, would they then come to someone like you, Peter, and say, "Okay, we need you to come in. It's time to negotiate"?
Yeah, that's where I come in. I'm like often the lead negotiator for clients who maybe it's their first time or they're just not as comfortable, and so kind of directing the ship. Sometimes if they have a more comfortable in-house team who's well versed in this, then I'm more in the backseat, kind of being there as an advisor. But when things get more controversial, then I'll come forward. So yeah, that's what folks like me are there to help employers with.
And I imagine someone who specializes in labor law must have very strong skills of I mean, you're such a relatable person. The minute I met you, we had such a but I imagine most people feel like that about you, because you just have
Thanks.
that you've got that something, right?
Thank you.
So when you really do have to have really great negotiation skills, but more than that, I would think that you need to have very good personal skills and that you relate well to people and you're open to hearing both sides and you try to withhold judgment. Am I right about that?
No, yes, I think you are right. I think all of those attributes can definitely go a long way in helping with the negotiation process. I mean, what I find so interesting about the law in general, and it comes so true in the unionized settings, is that really what this is about is understanding what it means to be human, right? And that's something that I'm always just really curious about. I'm always asking, what does it mean to be human? Why, why do the workers, what are they thinking? Why would they care about this? And at the same time, I'm also a pretty practical guy, and so I like to think, okay, well, like let's get our heads out of the clouds, come down, and say, what are the business realities in front of us that need to be met? We can't just pay everybody $1 million a year, like that's just not feasible, right? And so yeah, there's an element of EQ that comes into play. I my approach is actually it's quite informed from my experience. I've been a lawyer for almost 11 years now. I spent about 5 years in house at a labor union that took a different approach to labor relations, which was rather than being adversarial, which is the sort of stereotypical approach that unions might take, they were collaborative, and that bled through everything that we did. It bled through our negotiation, it bled through the whole relationship, bled through in litigation, and so it's rather than seeing the employer as the bad guy and this creating this us and them dichotomy. It was seeing, okay, what are our common goals? Let's identify those and work on this together. And I take that approach with my employer clients as well, now that I largely represent employers, is hey, this is something that, okay, they've been certified. We didn't want that to happen, but that's the reality. The people have spoken. And so now let's, rather than dig into an us and them mentality, let's focus on what are our common goals. Let's collaborate together and come alongside and figure out how to do this together.
Outplacement and career transition support make a real difference for employees experiencing terminations or layoffs. Offering these services also reduces legal and reputational risk for employers. All of First 30's outplacement programs include access to a live coach, along with 1 year of access to our career transition portal, job search resources, and much more. Programs start at $985 per participant. You can find information about our programs and pricing at first30ready.com/outplacement, or reach out to us anytime at info@first30ready.com. tell me if there's other topics we should speak about because, again, it's not something I know a lot about. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you about striking or the threat of striking because I imagine that is like the worst case scenario for once you have a union established. If you're an organization that really didn't want that to happen, that is not great. But it's something you have to work with within the law. And then the next phase would be, how do you now avoid, and I think it will relate back to what you were talking about, how do we avoid a union being established in our organization in the first place? How do we avoid a strike action by our employees?
Yeah. So I think to your question about if there's other topics that we should talk about, I think it is useful for the audience to kind of understand some of the mechanics around starting a union,
Yeah.
and then that can then tie into the strike question. So if your workplace is not already unionized, just in a non-construction setting, and so a typical manufacturing space where you've got one secure location, and you're manufacturing steel, say, um, then if a union comes into your workplace, they typically are there before before you realize. They will kind of organize. They'll start talking, like handing out materials. They'll meet people off site. They're not allowed to come on your premises, but they'll take people. They'll say, "Hey, we're having an event at Tim Hortons down the street, just to talk about what it means to be a union." They'll gather support. Once they have a threshold of at least 40% support, and they think that they've got that. And what I mean by support is signed membership cards saying that I am a member of this union. Once they have that 40% threshold, then they can make an application for certification to the labor board, and then the employer only has 48 hours from that date, from that time, to respond, to file a response. And so that's
That's like
often
holiday canceled situation.
100%,
If you,
yeah. And it's
yeah,
it's you know it's the kind unions do it on a Wednesday. The less kind ones will do it on a um,
Friday
on
afternoon.
a well, I mean, then you have some extra time 'cause it's business days.
Sure.
But yeah, so it's a tight turnaround, and that's usually when you want legal counsel to help you with that, because there's some rules and procedures you need to follow. But you basically give your information as an employer about what the employees, who all the employees are, what their status is, to the labor board. You submit that, and then there's 5 days from the date of the application until there's a vote. And so you've got 5 days as an employer, to try to convince them to change their minds. And there's all kinds of rules around what you can and cannot say and do. And it's, like one of them being you can't terminate people if you think that they're suspected of supporting the union. But there are things that you can do, to share your opinion, to share some, basic facts about what unionization will mean, what the implications are.
My question would be like, what would those things be? Can I send out a communication internally to all of our employees? Can I organize a town hall with everyone to
Yeah.
talk? Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So yeah, you can send out a communication. That's often what we do, is to send out a communication just to share, hey, we're aware that this happened, and we prefer to deal directly with you guys. We don't think that we need to have a third party involved in this relationship, but we fully support your right and your freedom to choose. That's an important thing to reiterate. When it comes to town halls, I'm always quite cautious in with my clients around that, because if you're gonna have a town hall that's like closed, like just for the purpose of talking about it, there may
Hmm.
be the perception of influence there, because you're not allowed to
Uh,
interfere. But if you have a regularly scheduled town hall in that time anyways, and then you want to also bring it up, then that would be a lot less risky. But there's things that you can say, and that's where it's good to, train your supervisors, for instance, who are on the floor, around things that they can and cannot say, which is like, yeah, hey, I don't think, I don't think that that it would be helpful to have the union. Like, you can share your opinion, and you can share examples if someone says, hey, I feel like I'm not being seen or being heard, then again, that's one of the things where I think if a trained supervisor can say, "Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. What are ways that that you don't feel seen and you don't feel heard?" And yeah, and just get them to listen and to give them an example then of like, "Oh, hey, remember when you brought this issue before me before, and then we were able to deal with it pretty quickly." And that kind of can showcase to them that actually we are able to resolve things. We don't need to have someone else come in and do and make this a bit more complicated. So once it gets to the vote, which is almost always an electronic vote that you just do on your phone or your computer, then the threshold is just 50% plus one, like it's 51%, so 50 plus one votes. And the majority, if the majority vote in favor, then you are officially a unionized workplace. And then there's all kinds of, and you can't make any changes to the work. You can't suddenly give raises. You can't suddenly create new classifications out of the blue. Like, there's all kinds of rules around what you can and can't do. And then you'll start the process of bargaining and getting together to start putting together the collective agreement that we were talking about earlier.
And how long did you say an employer has to put together a collective agreement from the time the unions decided?
Yeah, well, so typically it's typically, I mean, the rules say that within 10 days it typically is when it starts. And so either party will serve the notice to bargain. And so but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be sitting across the table from each other within 10 days. It very rarely does. It's a very kind of again, hopefully usually collaborative process. People need time to wrap their heads around it. You need to, talk to you need to start costing out the like, what can we afford and everything like that. The union is going to start looking at the industry standards, what the other collective agreements in that industry are saying, so that they know what their position is going to be. They're going to need to form their committee. So is the employer. Is a lot of work that goes into
It
it.
just feels like it costs the employer a lot of money to do this, because if they, especially, well, it doesn't matter the size, right? Big or small. I can
Yeah.
see it making a smaller company go under, actually.
It does. It is very costly for employers. There's advantages. That there's some cost savings in some respects. And again, and that comes to often it leads to less turnover, so you get better retention, and you get that uniformity. I have had employers tell me that, hey, actually, like, I really like having a union because it keeps us
Oh, that's good.
sophisticated. It keeps us like compliant with all the rules around health and safety. They help give us training for my guys, and like, I don't have a huge HR department, so they keep me, making sure that I'm compliant with all that, and it keeps it simple. I don't have to negotiate with each individual person, so there is some value that can be had to an employer, but it does definitely impact margins, and that's something that
In the short term, I
in the
guess. So
short
what you're
term.
it sounds like it's long-term advantage for some, but short term, it's quite a cost. Now, what about strikes? I'm just thinking right now because
Mm.
WestJet is
Oh,
on
right.
strike at the right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so that is the ultimate, I guess, fear of an employer, is that folks
Yeah.
will decide to strike.
Well, and I think, yeah, no, and it's a power that the employer possesses as well, right? And that's called a lockout. A strike, there are some steps that need to be followed until you get to that point. So if you've, like, forced mediation, it's not a surprise by the time you get to that point, is what I'm trying to say. The employer
Right.
knows that this is going to
Sure.
happen
Sure.
because we're
Yes.
so far apart on
Yes.
how much they're asking for, right? And especially
Yeah.
with the cost of living increases that we've seen. And what happens is, right, people they're coming out of a 3-year collective agreement. Well, in the past 3 years, the cost of living has, gone up substantially. So their asks are going to be a lot more than a typical renewal of a collective agreement. So that does create that potential. The reality is, it's a right that's there, and that is a threat, an ultimate threat when you're at the bargaining table. At the same time, the employer also has the ability to lock them out, and that's where when you're having conversations with your workforce about what does it mean to, to have a union here? Like they might be promising you the moon, but that doesn't mean that the employer is going to or even can agree to that. And if you're striking, you're not, what does that mean? You're not making money, right? Like the union will pay you a very small portion of what you normally earn, but like that's an economic reality that I think, yeah, I think a lot of workers will be influenced by the union when they're making their decision to go in without being fully educated because they're only getting it from one side. And so that's where there is a good opportunity for employers to educate them on the other side.
Wow. Well, I have learned so much. I feel like this is a topic we could talk about and talk about and talk about. But if
Mm.
you want to get in touch with Peter, I'm going to make sure, Peter, your email address or your website and everything is in the show notes, so
Hmm.
that folks can get in touch with you if they're facing these challenges. They need legal a lawyer to come in and support them. But now we need to spill some tea.
Well, I only have
And I'm sure
coffee.
you oh, no, that's okay. We'll have to make some tea, take a pause, and then spill it everywhere. But do you have a little, so for anyone who's listening for the first time, we do a spill the tea segment where we share some surprising or interesting story, maybe one you've heard, and we don't, of course, reveal any details that would lead someone to know who the client was or anything like that. But what do you have for us today, Peter?
In line with what we've been talking about, I think that something that a lot of people are will be surprised to hear, I think, is in the sort of shocking kind of category. I would say it's not funny because nothing about labor law is really actually that funny. So
No,
unfortunately, I
no.
try to bring some comedic relief, but yeah, it's
You do have a good sense of
and
humor,
oh,
right?
thank you. Thank you. My head just got 3 times bigger, but
Oh,
no. So the thing is, so there's spies that unions use in the workplace. This happening right now in real time all over the country, and like they're called salts or plants. And so salting is a thing that it's a strategy unions deploy where they'll hire people to go out and get hired by employers to then sort of infect the workplace and get them to turn. I think that's really fascinating, and it'd be like there's something appealing about it, and kind of like James Bond-esque, that seems really, really cool. But it's proven to be really effective. I mean, Starbucks, they unionized in the States largely because of assault.
so let me get this clear. It's called salt, like a salt shaker?
Yeah, I think it's because, I mean, salt is like a preservative, right? That like can have it, like if you put a bit of salt in it, I guess it can. That's just my inference. I haven't looked into the history on the
Salt
naming
I'm
of
thinking
it.
salt on a wound,
Oh
which is
yeah,
kind of like, "Oh, something wrong's happening? Let's dump some salt on
yeah.
that."
But it's
Yeah.
effective and it's powerful. And I mean, there's ways, that employers can prevent it. Like you can usually see in someone's history on their resume, for instance, like if they've moved around a lot, then that's a bit of a red flag for someone who might be
Oh,
assault.
wow.
Also knowing which union,
Interesting.
if you look at where they worked, that'll give you
Yeah.
probably an indication also as to which union they were part of, and then that, like, if that union is trying to take over your workplace,
Oh,
because then there's a whole, and we
wow.
haven't gotten into it, but there's this whole other fighting game that happens within unions where one is unionized and another union will come in and try to take it over. And so that's
What's
called a
the
raid.
advantage? I mean, might sound like a naive question, but what is the advantage of a union taking over a new company? What is the advantage to them? Is it more, is there, yeah, just, I'm not even going to try to guess.
They get the dues. They get, like,
Right.
it's just that's the main advantage. But there's also, it's more common in the construction industry, where there's some
Sure.
power dynamics, and there's also different setups of unions where some of them will have hiring halls where they have guys who are not employees of of a company. They're employee like they are members of the union who then get placed by the union wherever there's work, and so the union needs to have places for them to go. And so that's also part of why they might.
On the, like, more innocent side, I would say, like, construction safety is so critical that
Mm.
unions can play a very important role in this. I mean, manufacturing as well, but I'm just thinking construction sites can there's just so much danger, if things aren't to a T on those sites, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also like training is a big part of that, like supervisor training,
Mhm.
and also just apprentices and all that, and the supports along with that. Unions are, across the board are really stepping up in that way and supporting those efforts of training and health and safety standards. And then the one other thing that I feel like is helpful to know about the unionized context is that then you're not workplace disputes are all kind of contained within its own system. There's no access that employees have to the courts. Everything has to be stayed within the tribunal, and so there's efficiencies there to be gained. And that also, as an HR professional who might be approaching a unionized workplace, that's also helpful to know that things are, yeah, they're less procedural, they're more efficient, and can help resolve. I mean, the goal overall is in the legislation is to help keep people working as much as possible and as efficiently as possible. So,
Well, this has been fascinating. I'm so glad you were able to join us and make the time. So, thank you very much. And I'm sure that everyone listening has just learned. I mean, maybe people probably had a better base than I did. But if whether you're in a unionized environment or not, as an HR professional, this is a very important topic because you never know if you're looking for a new job and you're moving into a unionized environment. These are really important things to know about. So thank you, Peter, so much for joining us today.
my pleasure, Amy. This was fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks. And everyone thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of your day as well.